to wrap up this session, we've now got a panel. So if I could invite our 4 panel members to the stage, and then I'll introduce them. While that's happening, I started my career in the regional press, and they always told me that the best way to increase circulation of a regional newspaper was to publish lots of pictures of groups of people, because everyone in the group would go out and buy the actual paper. So to increase the traffic on our Twitter stream, I thought I'd take a quick picture of the audience and tweet it, and then you can all retweet it to show you were here. So if you are ready for your quick photo, let's... everyone smile. Oh. Cool. Okay, so we now have our final panel of the morning, and I'll just quickly introduce people. But firstly, what we're going to be talking about is marketing to one audience across different panels. So we're going to tie in quite a lot of the themes we've heard in the papers and also in that fireside chat. So really to think of it as like the final orange in the Christmas stocking, that we're going to be an extra treat at the end of the day. To help me look at this and see if we can reach a consensus about where we're going, I've got 4 experts who very much got skin in this game in terms of being measurement or in terms of being involved in the selling of airtime. So I'd like to I'll start from the far left there. So I'll introduce very quickly, we have Josh Dreller, who's VP of Product Marketing for Television at the Social Data Scientists 4C. We've got Keld Nielsen, who's Global Chief Client Officer for Kantar Media, who conduct TV measurements around the world. We've got Kees Wilbrink, who's Sales Director at BrandDeli, the Dutch sales house for Discovery, Fox and Viacom, amongst others. And closest to me, we've got Jonathan Sykes, who's Executive Chairman of Return Path Data Specialists, Genius Digital. So I'm going to throw it open to the audience towards the end, but I've got a series of questions for myself, and I'd like to kick off by asking a fairly fundamental question. So, and it had been slightly touched on, I think, in a number of papers, but not explicitly. If we're going to be gathering data on advertising across different sizes of screens and different types of screens, from 90-inch 4K high-definition screens to 3-inch smartphones, should all screen exposures be valued equally? Or to put it another way, do consumers no longer judge content based on the type of screen they're looking at? And should agencies value screens equally, or is there a difference? So I don't know, Josh, do you want to kick us off on that one?
Sure, yeah. What's been mentioned throughout this conference is that consumers just experience brands regardless of screen, regardless of content. They're just seeing this relationship with the brand across these screens as one thing. So the advertisers should see it that way too, and just better understand the context and how those screens are used by consumers instead of just treating them as their own. I think that's it's anti at this point. But to me, this whole notion of this fragmentation of screens and everything is this big challenge. To me, that's the opportunity. Consumers are watching more and more sight, sound, motion than ever before, which should be a great opportunity for television advertisers to get in front of them in a way that they haven't before. And I just keep hearing more and more rhetoric on how it's hard and it's a problem, and instead of seeing it as this golden opportunity to really understand how consumers are using screens. And if your team of specialists can use screens better than your competitors, you can leapfrog and you can gain market share, and that's what we're dealing with. So anyone who's not kind of aligning themselves to that new paradigm, I just wonder what they're waiting for.
So from a measurement perspective, when we talk about, within the measurement industry, sometimes about cross-media measurement as opposed to cross-platform measurement, people introduce this phrase called media weighting, which is the idea that somehow an impact on one media is not the same as an impact on another, and they need to be weighted. So from your perspective, whether I'm sat in my local View Cinema seeing a massive screen with the new Volvo launch on it, or if I'm seeing it on my tablet, on my lap at home, there is no difference that the advertiser should be paying for in that?
For advertisers, they definitely need to worry about how that's being received. I think this kind of chase to find this golden bullet currency or something is ridiculous. You have to treat each screen differently and understand, there's not that a view or impression or impact is completely different by screens. It's just that consumers are not seeing the difference. We have to understand that difference for them in the way that we market, the way that we value the inventory, the way that we measure the impact and the influence. It's absolutely critical. We have to understand that that's a new variable, just like the programming, just like the network, just like any other variable. It's just something we have to align ourselves with.
And Kees, when you're talking to your clients, are you perceiving a big difference in terms of your customers, your products being on, that the broadcasters being on different sizes of screen, or is it largely the most important thing to get people to watch in the first place, regardless of the screen?
Well, I think a topic that hasn't been mentioned much before is that the impact of where you are is of highly importance for the advertiser. And what we see, the biggest growth with direct advertisers for us at BrandDeli is e-commerce parties. They tend to go to TV because they see the effect of what the big screen brings them. And earlier we saw another thing, that cinema is growing by the day. And that's all because of the impact of what TV as it is brings, and we should see that as a value. And we should find maybe ways to when we talk about all the programmatic stuff, we are all focusing on whom is watching, but there's no technology yet for what they are watching. We should find maybe standards so that advertisers can plan across device on what people are watching. And there's a big challenge, I guess, for the future, because fragmentation is here.
By what you meaning, the content, or?
Yeah, what they're watching, what content they are watching. Because when I started in this business, it was easy to say that mobile is different from the TV at the wall. But when someone is watching a TV program on his mobile in the subway, it's the same. So it's the content what it's about, but the technology does not fairly seem to recognize yet what someone is watching.
Also, to a certain degree, one of my bugbears is that the media trade press doesn't seem to understand the difference, and that you keep seeing headlines about internet overtakes television, and then to your point, a lot of what's on the internet is television being delivered with the internet as a platform, as opposed to, so television is transitioning from being a set to being a platform, to being a medium available across lots of different platforms and lots of different screen sizes.
Isn't that also brought about by this legacy idea of reach and frequency as the measurement of choice? This old idea that because when you just had one box, the delivery was the thing you chased. I come from a very native digital background. I've only been in television for 2 years, and I continue to be completely confused that the measurement of success, the currency as I keep hearing it, is simply, did we reach a certain number of people, certain number of times? From a digital standpoint, and I think the digital natives, advertising natives would agree with me, that's just obtuse. It's absolutely where you are, what you are, the content. I think sometimes the digital side gets a little rubbed on because we're chasing audiences too much, but the digital folks that I talk to, the best advertisers and agencies I talk to, it's very important of what the context is of where they are, what the quality of the content is. And it's always this kind of sliding scale between audience and content. And screen now just becomes one of those other variables that you have to understand. Someone on the go with a 3-inch screen, you can't talk to them the same way that someone sitting in front of a 55-inch TV. That's not anything anyone would disagree with in this room. So it's more about how we value and evaluate the media. And I don't mean measurement, I just mean true value of the media impression. And I think from a TV perspective, because for so long it's just been simply this reach and frequency goal, because this box was pretty much the same size, that's what's spilling over. And when I go to these TV conferences, this is what I keep hearing.
We got...
sorry, just quickly. It's, of course, that's the classic discussion. From a TV point of view, 90% of the stuff our mass media advertisers are selling are sold offline. So the connection between between the selling and what cost that selling is hard to make.
Right.
And then we get into the discussion of branding or everything. So from that perspective, it is still possible to find to bring branding commercials towards, for instance, mobile, if someone is watching TV content or valuable content.
Agreed. But when you're watching a TV, it's a different type of experience, a more lean-back experience. When you're on the go with a laptop, or you're on the go with a tablet, watching on the train on the way to work, when there's a lot of other things pulling you around, or on a computer, laptop, desktop, where you can click between tabs. When the ad starts to roll, you can click over to email, check your email real quick, listen to when the ad ends, and then flip back over to watch your content. So it just all starts with understanding the context of each.
So how do we factor in the context then to the data we're gathering? Are there ways in which we can actually have that additional dimension, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, to me it's quite simple. I look at people out there at the moment who are on their own screens, you know. Please, we're here. But, you know, it is all about engagement. And the reality is...
They're tweeting all your wise words.
You know, we can spend 20 minutes on this, or we can spend 1 minute. I mean, to me, it is a different value on a different screen according to the market you're trying to reach. So...
Agreed.
Next.
OK. We're making good progress. We're agreeing on things. So the next question, ironically, given Josh's comments about reach and frequency, was about reach and frequency, and specifically picking up on what we heard about the Sky Advanced system. In terms of the ability to sequence and frequency cap across screens, to what extent do we think known TV behaviour can drive what people's subsequent digital behaviour is, and then the other way around, to what degree can what people are doing online determine what buying decisions you make about TV itself? How can they, let's assume we have got this ability now to perfectly understand the interactions, how will the two dovetail? How will they work between each other? I mean, Kees, I don't know if you want to kick off on.
Well, yeah. Of course, all data and knowledge can bring us extra chances. But if you say, how can frequency capping across devices help us? There's a huge advantage right before our feet. If you look in the Netherlands, the most popular commercials, the top 10, for 50% equal the most annoying commercials. And I think one of the reasons is the frequency that the same joke is made over and over again. And in the current fragmentation, we have a problem. Our advertisers have a problem. They need frequency capping across these devices.
But isn't it ironic that the internet, where, taking as an example, one of the big arguments people often have about the way addressable advertising works on the internet is the frequency issue itself, that having established that you are about to go on holiday to Italy, you are stalked around the internet for the next 4 weeks and the 2 weeks after you've come back, selling you hotels in Italy. So I'm not quite sure if the internet hasn't quite figured that out, how that then gets applied into TV in terms of understanding what the actual optimum frequency of something is, if you see what I mean. Because maybe just seeing something once or twice, there's some ads people will want to see a lot. If it's an ad that's, you know, one that they really love, you know, the old cliche about, you know, the ads being better than the programmes, compared to something that's much more call to action, yeah, I've got it, I don't need to see that anymore. Is there a difference in terms of the creatives, do you think?
I think the biggest problem is the technologies, the various technologies that are there and aren't combined together yet. In terms of programmatic, we're still mostly in the phase of solving the problem instead of, you know, there's a problem. TV is going down and the reach of TV is going down, and it's going towards a huge fragmented world with all different technologies, and the challenge we have together is to find, to connect those dots and to be able to cap. And I think that's hard for advertisers.
So if we do connect the dots, I mean, Keld, do you think the world is ready for a unified buy where any screen counts against any target audience goal, that everything's essentially, if we could do it and everything's neutral, do you think that the world's ready for that?
Well, I think the answer to that question is equally fragmented as video consumption, because I think it varies a lot from country to country, where if I look at this internationally, I see a lot of different demands. And for us as a research company, it's more about making the information available. So all dimensions, all the screens, all the platforms. And we saw yesterday the talks about Norway, how that's done there. And we heard about from Justin today about Barb, and also he mentioned Italy. And it's happening all over the place, sort of in Turkey, in Denmark, in Norway, etc., where we are trying to bring all these elements together and make it available in order for us to make it available to the marketplace, so that the likes of you guys can take those decisions and have that information. Our biggest concern as a research company is that you get drawn to these shiny new objects about the internet, and you dilute the currency that we believe is based around a core panel. And then you are adding in information about online measurement, time shift viewing, etc. And we saw the example of RPD from Justin that they're doing. We have done tests in odd places like Pakistan, of sort of the same places. But we still believe that it has to be supplement to the core, say the Barb panel or the other panels. So making that available is our objective for the marketplace to take right decisions, and not. It is still gold standard, and if you add in silver and copper and gold, at some point, if you continue to do that, it's not going to be gold any longer.
Can I quickly just add on that, the shiny baubles thing, on the basis that there's so much that can be used currently with data that people aren't doing, that yes, I can give you an example of a client not in this territory who is looking at light, medium, and heavy users on the set-top box and targeting them in an automated way via their video-on-demand services, different adverts. So yes, you can do that. Yes, it's interesting uplift, but there's so much. I think Stuart Garvey, I don't know if he's still here. Stuart, Bell? No. Okay. Yeah, I think he said it yesterday. There's, okay, he said an awful thing. No, he said it very simple. There's so much to be done at the moment with set-top box data that can, yes, it can help online, but it can hugely help the existing clients have a much better understanding of their audience.
I completely agree that the return pass data, which we established the first panel about 12 years ago and have it in 14 countries around the world, and now it's become mature, actually. So now you're starting to do tests to actually bring it into the currency trading. Don't forget that RPD services is mainly proprietary services that they are not a trading currency anywhere in the world, except maybe from South Africa. But it is a supplement, and I completely agree it can be done a lot of return path data, but you cannot live without the core trading currency. And to Justin's point, just alone in the UK, if I get my math right, it's about £20 million a day, 365 days a year, that is changing hands based on the Barb panel alone, and you do not want to dilute that currency by putting in...
Why don't we want to dilute that currency?
No, I'm not saying... what I'm saying is you can bring in other kinds of measurement, but you need the core panel in order to get the full picture for the whole universe. That's my view.
I think marketers are chasing the wrong thing. I mean, each of these channels has a different set of metrics and a different set of standards. This idea that you have this standard across and everything has to match up to what one currency is doing still doesn't make sense at all to me. I understand that's the way that it's currently bought and sold, but that doesn't mean it's the right way. And now that we live in this universe where there's so many devices and so many channels and so many different ways to do content, it seems to me, let each channel work its own channel. I mean, I think there is something good across reach and frequency across the channels. I think that's a good that's a good way to measure your delivery and understand that you're not hitting too many people up with the same stuff that, they know your ad is, they know your movie's coming out. They know your new model of phone's coming out. But individually, this idea that there's this holy grail measurement that we need to bring screens together so that we can look into one number to see how each one is doing just doesn't make sense. And right now, as you said, there's so much data out there already. Let the social teams, you got specialists on social, you got specialists in TV, specialists in search, specialists in print, let them do what they do and look at how your sales are at the end of the year to tell you how well your marketing is doing, not how well you're delivering or how well you're buying or how well, all these other pieces. Maybe one day we'll get to a point, but I don't think consumers want us to track them across devices anyway, and it's going to get increasingly hard as more devices.
Can I comment on that? Yeah. Because that is definitely not what I'm hearing when I'm talking to broadcasters and other clients around the world. What everybody is asking at the moment is we want to be able broadcasters, which is still let's account for the majority of advertising spent around the world.
Okay.
So when you talk to those guys, the request is definitely we want to track campaigns across devices, across platforms, any device. We want that complete picture of that Unilever P&G campaign that we are getting. That is what we're seeing here in the UK. You're seeing it all over Europe, even in odd places where you expect that online is not really playing a role, but they're still asking for that.
Understood, but yes, if you look at where the whole thing's going, I mean, we see it chart after chart here that the whole thing is it's shrinking, and that we should be planning for the shift, not for trying to continue to retrofit back into the way we are. I do believe there's still, for broadcasters, what they're doing is still valuable and still important. And as I talk to more TV people, the more that I learn, the less I realize I know about TV because there's so many ins and outs of it. And if that system's working for them.
That example, you say what broadcasters are doing is fine, but then if a broadcaster is moving on, is on the online platform or on a mobile phone or whatever the device is, are you saying they should have different metrics because they're on that device?
That's right. Absolutely.
Which is really interesting because a lot of the events I go to, it's almost a common sort of trope that we all need to move towards unified metrics.
And I think that's a broadcaster.
You're espousing like a media research equivalent of Brexit, where we all basically pull apart.
I just think that's a broadcaster-centric point of view, and the world is continuously moving toward a non-broadcaster point of view, even though the majority of the money is.
It's a mass media point of view.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And there's nothing wrong with mass media, especially since we are not yet able to look in the heads of people. And then we need to look at a broader effect of what an advertiser is doing. And in the current situation, we are not able to connect the dots. There are several ecosystems expanding everywhere. Every initiative we heard is their own ecosystem, because if you want to connect the same viewer, you never know if it's the same viewer. Until we're able to do so, we need data as we have in urgency measurement.
Well, can I also comment on the declining, sort of, you said declining numbers, which I will completely disagree with, because remember, a lot of the growth in the internet is actually driven by mobile and video. So, and it's more a question about who is on that platform. What is television? Is it the big screen? My mantra is that within 5 years from now, when the price on touchscreen, big touchscreens, we will all have an iPad on the wall. And then what is it then? Is it then video or television? The growth is definitely there, and you'll see it all over the world, actually.
Well, let's move on from sort of part the idea of metrics and move specifically on to the technology and the data and where that's actually coming from. So if we want a 360-degree view of consumers across platforms, how do we get there? I mean, Jonathan, do you want to give us your thoughts?
I guess really simply, I'd say there's already people that are already nearly there, Sky, and every operator out there has the potential to be much, much closer than it is now. You know, Genius Digital, what we do is look after and manage data sets for pay TV operators or OTT operators throughout the world. And the technology is there. I mean, the reality is that data, I think it's been said quite a lot of times, set-top box data, you know, so number one, you get your set-top box data or the return path data and make sure it is quality. It's an amazing asset. Compared to other data from other DMPs or whatever, it is incredibly, incredibly valuable. Number two, get it in a way that is easy for your advertisers, your sales force to use. The amount of operators I see around there, and the IT department will say, yeah, our data's in a great position, yeah, we're wonderful, and the sales guys say, no, it's not, it's shit, you know? So, you know, and I think that makes a real difference. And I think third, we haven't talked about it here at all, but, you know, at all in the last couple of days, insight. You know, data. Insight from data. I think maybe earlier on they said the new data scientists are rock and rollers. I've never been called a rock and roller, but, you know, it's really true. And actually, in my experience, it's not just, you know, insight from data that's very important. And I'd love to know Jamie's view on this and other ones, but actually independent insight is also very, very important. I've been in so many CEOs and C-suite discussions when the same set of data means different things according to your agenda. If the CEO says, you know what, you know, we won the vote, we had the popular vote, you know what, then, but they still lost the election, you know, or you have other people who, so I think not just insight, you know, independent insight is really, really important. And I guess the last thing, which, you know, we model ourselves in actually doing many of the things, or trying to do for operators on the things that Sky have done, is you can have all the technology and all the data inside, whatever, but unless it's actionable, you know, and Sky to me have shown that, you know, it is actionable. You know, just, you know, there's a lot there that can be done now.
But, you know, what people like Sky are doing is good for Sky. If you're a marketer, how do you, now they're giving us a 360. Now you have a bunch of little 360 views and 360 ways of working that now break the whole idea of how we can understand how we're reaching customers across these things.
I can answer that really easily. I don't think it's just good for Sky. Otherwise, the clients wouldn't do it. Yeah. And number two is many times TV is in an ability to do lots of the things that data is doing. So what Sky are doing, and you know, there's platforms around the world that are actually taking the first steps to listen, I think, more acutely to the clients and the advertisers and say, you know what, we're not in a perfect world yet. We don't have this confederation of data or federation of data in the way that was asked for earlier. But we can do a huge amount for the clients now that will make sure we retain money, deliver better value, et cetera, et cetera.
I just meant on the context of understanding across all things. Yes, I agree, having that vertical thing, I was very interested in hearing their model. And as for a marketer who is trying to reach people across screens, they can help you do it, and other people with the walled gardens company do it. But for this panel of understanding across screens, now you've got individual players telling you how all the screens are working together, how you can activate across screens. You know, that, once again, you're building all these little pieces. It's not helping you truly understand if you're impacting your consumer with all of your media.
Okay, I'm going to, we're conscious of time because we know you want to get to lunch, so we're just going to have literally just 5 minutes of questions. But so if you've got anything you'd like to ask our panel, do raise your hand. I know, Jamie, do you want to?
So I'm really interested to understand Josh's viewpoint, particularly in a world where, you know, at Sky we see hundreds of advertisers a year. We speak to a lot of our broadcaster platforms and partners, and the themes that we've had come back to us from the whole industry is we want transparency, we want consistency in measurement, we want true traffic, not fraudulent traffic, and the very notion that we're going to sort of descend into a world where, you know, 60% of traffic on some DSPs is fraudulent and paid for at, you know, 100%, just seems just completely nonsensical to me. So I'm really intrigued to see and to hear how you think that is ever a good world to operate in.
Well, it's not. And like I said, for this panel, How is your marketing working across screens? Working with individual people that have walled gardens is not going to help a brand truly understand that. I think they're going to get better results by using a network like yours for a portion of their buy. But if we're really talking about how you're impacting the consumer journey across all of your media, which is now becoming across all screens, how are you helping the advertisers? In fact, someone asked, are you going to provide that data? That would be a way to help advertisers, but that's not necessarily great for Sky because that's your asset and you're leveraging it in actually the best way possible for you guys.
So I think it's really interesting. We don't see ourselves as a walled garden, but what we do see is that we protect the privacy that we're obligated to do so under European law, that we don't pass PII data, device ID and IP address outside the ecosystem unless it's fully audited and mandated. So we have data integrations with tens of advertisers where they data match on a third-party platform with us to enable cross-platform advertising in a safe, compliant, brand-building, brand fame-building platform, whether it be in TV and digital. So we're not a walled garden, but we are a great partner for brands and agencies.
And I guess the only point I can add to that, I think pay TV operators throughout the world have the ability to ape a lot of what you do without spending the amount of money that you've been fortunate enough to spend.
So I'm going to just take, I think this have to be the last question because people's stomachs are rumbling.
So coming from the digital side, this is a really interesting conversation for me because the problem that we're talking about here from Josh is that when we go into a DSP and we set up a campaign, and I run programmatic campaigns that extend on phone and social and mobile and digital out of home and now to be TV, when we set those things up, we are putting in literally a frequency cap of 5, of 10, whatever. The problem exists when you do have so-called walled gardens and you have little pieces of things. Like we have 22 plus logins to different DSPs because there's things that we want to test. And we really try and get that all into one platform so that we can manage the frequency across everything. And that's the goal that I think Josh is trying to get to, that while it's a complete advantage and way better than it was before to be able to do the kinds of buys that can happen now on Sky and others, will we be able to truly manage frequency? And to be fair, like advertisers aren't really putting up their hands and saying, frequency guys, like we need that ultimate control. It is a concern and a topic of conversation, but we know it's important. We know that there is an optimal frequency. So I think on the agency and the buy side, we are pushing for that. And it does become a little bit of a challenge when we have to go into different sources of inventory and buy that separately, and we don't have a unique way of looking across everything. That's why on the buy side, we push for everything to be integrated into a single source so that we can drive those extra insights that aren't just limited to the spaces where the inventory and the data plays, but those insights can be then generated by more data and more inventory all working together in order to provide a unified insight from across all of those things. So I see both sides.
We'll see if we return to the theme of walled gardens this afternoon as well, because I know it does crop up, not least in the case of two of the biggest ones, Google and Facebook.
Who offer this cross-screen thing,
yeah,
you know, in a way with data and targeted measurement.
Cool. Well, I think we'll wrap up there because it has been a long session. I'm just going to before you leave, I think Derek's just got a few housekeeping things. But firstly, if you could just thank our panel.